You got the distribution call, you got the placement, you did everything right. And somewhere between the purchase order and the shelf, something went sideways. Your product isn't there, or it's there, but it's wrong. Or nobody can tell you either way. Every CPG brand hits this wall. Most of them hit it more than once. I'm Jordan Karcher, founder and CEO of Eileen. Know Thy Shelf is a show for founders and CPG superstars who are done taking anyone's word for what's happening to shelf. Real stories, real data, one question underneath all of it. Your product is listed as in stock. Is it though? Today I'm speaking with Amy Ezrin, partner at the Piedmont Guy and founder of Giovese Family Wines. Amy, you have quite a background in wine. You've been in the industry for around 20 years, even going back to living in Italy, training as an opera singer. It's not a path you often hear about. Can you start off by just telling us a bit about your background and how you got into the world of wine?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that it's not as exotic as it seems, because from this side, I can't tell you the number of, shall I say, I don't want to say failed, but, ex-opera singers in this business. I don't know I do know what it is. I think it's the kind of combination of culture and history and speaking languages. And, I don't know, there's some little gateway there because I feel like we're a dime a dozen. But really, kind of amazingly, like we could put together quite the little wine industry chorus if we tried. Yeah, I, once upon a time followed a dream to go to be an opera singer, and I ended up living in Italy for 8 years as a result of that. This is a joke that I kind of even tell in bios, so it's not necessarily fresh news, but I like to say I was an okay opera singer, but I was a really good wine drinker. So it kind of seemed like a natural path to follow. So yeah, I left the Italy after about 8 years of living in Tuscany and moved back to New York, which is my hometown, and started in the wine industry. I kind of got lucky, sort of organically went through. I mean, first of all, I was in New York, so there's no shortage of importers here. And I started looking at back labels of wine bottles, which would be a little more difficult now for a variety of reasons, the plethora of different avenues into this industry, basically from a logistics standpoint. But back then you could really look at importer names on labels, and I picked a few out and I sent resumes, and lo and behold, I got a great first job with Skurnik Wines, who is I think a pretty well-known name in the fine wine game these days.
So did you work with wine at all in Italy, or was it just purely
Yeah, one way that many of us starving, struggling artists make it is by working in restaurants. And it's something that I did. I was drawn to actually at a very young age. I think my first restaurant job, I was 15. And it was something I would always pick back up during summers, etc. So at one point, I started working in New York City at a place called Capsuto Frere, which was one of its top French restaurants at the time. And I just, already liked wine well enough, but it usually came in like a magnum size Pinot Grigio format. But, I got into this environment. I started learning about French wines predominantly and American wines. And then I went to Italy and I kept working in restaurants and just kind of flipped the script and moved everything over from French to Italian, basically.
And you obviously have started a really cool brand and more of a unique serving format, being boxed wine. Coming from your background of probably premium wines in restaurants, premium wines in Italy, what was the appeal to you to go the box route, where traditionally people would avoid box, but I know you have a great palate and an eye for opportunity?
It's all about just the right light bulb going off at the right time. So it started kind of, let's say the origin story in a way is with this time of living in Tuscany and then moving back and working in wine. And I speak Italian quite well. And I speak it with a distinctively Florentine accent, which the other Italians find rather hilarious. But I would joke because everybody would, even producers, like they would be talking to my colleagues at, whatever wine company I was working at. They'd be like, do you know what her accent sounds like? They would all really find it quite amusing. So I had this alter ego that I came up with called Sandy Giovese, which the big grape of central Italy is San Giovese, right? It's the grape that's in the wine Chianti. Most people know Chianti. So the grape in that is actually called San Giovese. So I would joke that my alter ego was Sandy Giovese. And then flash forward to 2020. And we were all locked up in quarantine, especially here in New York City. And I had my little pod, and one of my pod members was a fellow importer who she had already really been championing box wines and good wine in boxes. And she's actually she's a master of wine now, and she was writing her thesis at the time. So I read the thesis for her, just kind of feedback, etc. And I learned a lot from it. And of course, I was aware of box wine, but I've thought the same kind of thing that everybody else did, the same stigma. So I read it. And I became really intrigued by the format. And suddenly, that little light bulb went off where I was like, oh, Sandy Giovese would make a great box wine brand. And the rest is history.
I love it. I had no idea that's where the name came from. And curiously, when you started going down the path of box wine, how different was the packaging process, or I guess production process, from your traditional bottled wine? Is it a wildly different experience, or is it very similar and it's just how it's secured?
I think it's not wildly different. You kind of have to put it in the context of, there are wines meant to age and there are wines for immediate consumption. And that's true in bottles as it is in the box. So the cycle is very similar to, fresh whites and fresh rosés, right? That you try to stay with a fairly current vintage. The big difference is that your window is a little tighter, in the sense that the package itself is not conducive necessarily to long-term aging. So whereas you could put, a simple little white, not that our wines are simple, but you could put, let's say, an inexpensive white in a bottle, and maybe you're meant to drink it in 2 years. Let's say you drink it in 3. Like, the wine will age and evolve, but it will still probably be pretty good. Unless it gets hot or something like that. With the box, you kind of have about a year, right? I've done many experiments with my own wine. So I can say the red will definitely last a little longer than that even, and will evolve actually quite well, meaning not overly evolved. The white and rosé, we have a little bit of a tighter window. And I'd say that was definitely not so much something that I needed to learn, but it's been something that I've needed to manage. And it's become something that we've put a lot of effort into actually over the last year, because I did find that there was like a little cleanup of inventory necessary. And it's not like where you have wine in a bottle where you're like, oh, I'll just, I'll sell it at half cost or whatever, and it'll be out there, because you kind of don't want that wine out there, because, you run the risk that it's just not going to be representative. So that was definitely a pitfall. There's other differences, like just, it's a little heavier of a box, how many are in a case. People saying like, well, where do I put it on my shelf? It doesn't fit where the bottles go. Like, there's definitely some things, but the biggest hurdle has not so much been the technical side of it as just, retailer impressions, more so even than consumer impressions. So I'm sure a whole nother topic here for us to talk about, but needless to say, it was just like if I were working with beer or something like that, your window is something that you really need to be very observant.
Yeah, and I think that's the category is really compelling, because traditionally, growing up, we had Franzia. That was like the box wine of memory. And now there are a lot of more interesting brands hitting the shelf. Do you see the consumer coming in more and more from the bottled wine to buy boxed, or is it a new consumer that's starting with a better box? Like, where do you see that kind of dynamic happening at the shelf?
Yeah, I think that the consumer for this product, or for these products, is really coming from a few different entry points. I think on one hand, we do have people who are already pretty acclimated to the idea of box wine and really just want to upgrade, just want to make sure that they're drinking something better, want to be a little more adventurous, want higher quality in general, right? Want less sugar, all that stuff. But then there are plenty of people who I think, there's like a second channel, which are like kind of the everyday drinker who may or may not want to actually reduce how much they drink. And this offers that opportunity to drink less and not have it go bad. But I think that these are people that maybe, have been buying decent value, let's put it that way, wines in bottles until now, and are like somehow introduced to the concept of this format being suitable to their like level, right? And exploring it and seeing the different opportunities and different advantages that it offers. And then third, I think there are definitely bottled wine drinkers that are coming over and saying, hey, like, I buy good wine, like I spend money on my wine. It's not so much that like I need to spend less, right? It's that I want the same quality, but I just want the convenience of this package, right? Like, I want to know that I'm getting the same quality and the same flavor and enjoyment that I got out of a glass bottle, but now I've got it in a format that, yeah, saves me a little bit of money, yeah, saves the planet. But mostly I can drink at my own speed.
Yeah. And so I guess that's a really good point and question I would have is after I tap the box or open it the first time, does it maintain the same quality throughout the box? Different than wine, obviously. I open a bottle, half a bottle the next day, it tastes very different from oxidation.
Right. And your
With
clock starts ticking.
And so with the box wine, you have a longer shelf life essentially after.
For sure. Again, I have multiple science experiments going on in my refrigerator at any time, but I find that, you easily can get 2 months out of a box. I think as you get lower in quantity because there's a bag inside of it, right? Inside of this cardboard box, and that bag actually collapses as you go and no oxygen ever enters in. So it really holds. The lower you get in the box, like if you've only got like maybe a few glasses left and it's been sitting for a while, it might, not be perfect, but it should hold. And especially, I always recommend keeping it in the fridge, just also because I love all of the wines, even the red, are kind of meant to be drunk a little chilled. So that refrigerator will even help more.
Yeah, and I mean, chilled red right now is such a hot segment. We see it all the time.
I love that you said that.
I've been having all kinds of interesting chilled reds out of Austria recently. I mean, it's just
Totally.
like very cool category. I think that's catching on. And you go back to the Beaujolais, the nice, refreshing summer reds. In your wine and in the box wine, have you seen any movement towards varietals? I know there's a lot of red, white, rosé, and kind of more broadly, just
Yeah.
sparkling. Do you see anything where people are looking for specific grapes in this category?
Yeah. So one thing, first of all, what I do, I see a lot of varietal boxes kind of out there. They might not be prevalent in like on consumer shelves. They might not be, doing great in traditional distribution, which I know you're familiar enough to know with wine and spirits. It's a whole labyrinth of just pain and suffering. But a lot of these I've noticed a lot that are coming out of California or the West Coast at least. And so they are pretty varietally driven nonetheless, which is kind of this like trope in a way that I feel like the West Coast just can't liberate itself from, especially given how many, cool things are going on with other grapes other than, Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. It's like, ugh, snooze, right? So I'm so bored. The thing with European wines is not only is there a kind of a cost difference just to the cost of production and registration, all that stuff, to having appellated wines in Europe. But a lot of times the box itself, they won't allow you to necessarily put an appellation on the box. Like it's restricted to bottles, right? So because of all that, at least with our wines, it was easier to classify them as Vino Rosso, Vino Bianco, Vino Rosato. But they're all blends of different grapes.
Got it. And is yours being produced all 100% in Italy? The juice is
100% in Italy, 100% at one winery, one family, closed circuit, which certainly differentiates the box. Like I said, a friend of mine who you should interview at some point, who also makes some great boxes. Hers are very much commensurate quality. There's other stuff out there I've seen that is maybe a little lower. People are really afraid to push the envelope on pricing here. And so, there's a few of us kind of in this category, but we are like struggling to maintain a price point that doesn't scare retailers off. So that's a fun time.
Well, I'm sure. And I think it's always tricky because you're coming in with higher volume. So the actual sticker shock of a single box versus a bottle sets them back. But then obviously the big selling point is how many glasses are in a box versus.
Totally. And a lot of, again, the impression of box wine is established by not so much Francia, bless their hearts, but Boda Box, Black Box, these guys are the big, huge players. And they're 3 liters of wine and they cost, $20, $25 maybe. And it's just, again, it's like a gatekeeper issue where retailers seem more afraid of it than the actual consumer does. And I'm like, well, then just don't put them in the back with the other crappy boxes. Like put them somewhere else so that people are like, why is this not with the boxes? Like it's a pretty easy move from a marketing perspective to just get better visibility and understanding that we're talking about a different quality here. I think the price point thing, what we are seeing is a strategy that some people are taking, they're doing 1.5 liter boxes that don't necessarily look drastically different in size from ours, but they're half as much wine for that kind of $30 price point so that people aren't freaked out. Whereas ours are like 30, 35, but 3 liters. So, there's like some communication that needs to happen here.
For sure. Yeah, I think that's it's a tricky one. It's tricky in every category of how do you avoid that pure sticker shock versus what the actual value is, and how do you?
Because math is so hard.
People don't like math, especially if you're about to have a drink.
I don't love it either.
So that I loved hearing about the background, the story of the product. Next, would really like to get into how you really went to market with this. So, I mean, starting it, coming up with a brand, coming up with the product, all that stuff. That's fun and also pre-launch. But then the launch comes. Like, how did you tackle going to retail and really starting to build out a footprint, knowing that you have your hands full with other projects and you're a one-woman?
So it's definitely getting harder now that we're at higher volumes. But, the easy part for me in a way was the sourcing product and getting that actual production part done. Right. And I suppose that's kind of the easy part for anyone in a way. Right. Like maybe I have, special terms and relationships and stuff that, from all of these years in the industry and knowing so many wineries. But like really anybody can in some way or another show up with a bag of cash and have their wine bottled, right, in Italy or France or Spain. The hard part to your point is really like, okay, once you've got this product, how do you sell it to anybody? So, I've been doing this for a long time. And the bottom rule in wine and spirits industry, importing is that you always have to have a plan for where that wine's going to go once it lands. You have to have all of your pricing set up, and you have to, have a plan for distribution. Again, it's like a perishable product in a way, right? So you got to have some basics. And, I feel like this is the part that people don't understand just how complicated it is, right? So what I personally did is once I knew that I had a product and a supplier, I had also at the same time been, of course, developing the brand and the look and the brand, the box and all of that, the packaging. Again, that's possibly the easy part in a way. So I took all of that and I put together a half decent presentation with, some imagery. And I had the winery prepare samples for me, which were shipped over. And I had already been talking to importers. So, fortunately, I have these relationships. So it was not hard to get people to talk to me. I knew also what kind of distributor or importer I wanted. I knew that I really wanted to kind of exploit the opportunity to sell to a national importer where they have both some direct distribution and then sell to distributors in other states, because I knew we'd be able to work on kind of a blended pricing. So because my pricing was, kind of subject to that. So I had a pricing strategy already in mind that I agreed to once I settled on an importer, which I was lucky enough to kind of land on the basis of those samples. I think, it was a compelling presentation. I think I have also, I enjoy people's trust to a certain extent. So that was, I would say that's definitely the hard part is, getting in with a company. There are, I would say, nonetheless, many routes to market for wine and spirits, right? Like you can be selling directly to chains if you've got those relationships. You could, have exclusive partners. I definitely wanted to go the route of traditional distribution because I really wanted this brand to be like the box wine of independent fine wine retailers. I wanted it to wear that identity very strongly. So it was important to me to be with a fine wine importer and with fine wine distributors. And then once we had an agreement and wine was on order, then it was like start farming this information out to people. I had some more bottled samples sent, that I slapped a fun sticker on, and, away we went and got a few people on board. So we had some kind of pre-sales already, which made it nicer for everybody. And we launched with one product to start.
Just one SKU?
Yeah.
Got it. And now I believe you're approaching 9,000 liter cases per year. Is that about right?
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. 9,009 liter cases. So that our cases are actually 18 liters, but they're all measured in this country. All the data is measured in 9-liter cases, which is what a traditional case of 12 bottles would contain.
Exactly. It's a good baseline for all of us. But You've grown obviously really rapidly and scaled quickly. And I think it's easy to just assume, okay, well, if I get it in, I find a distributor, an importer, the rest takes care of itself. What was it really like? What was that journey like going from, hey, you got the approvals, you're now starting to get distribution to now where you are today? What are some of the big, learning moments you had? I mean, you've been in
Right.
the industry forever. Was it different? Anything unexpected? Or was it kind of just like, yeah, this is exactly what I thought it
It's probably exactly what I thought. So, what
was?
what I would say is that the industry itself has changed more rapidly than we've grown in the past 5 years, which is not a small thing. I mean, there's been, I would say, tectonic level changes in our industry in the past 5 years. So it's kind of like, being very true to that fine wine identity again. And knowing like who my people are and how we're identified has been very important because ultimately this industry, it's been like you're on a very wide laned highway with all of these different companies and sources. And a lot of it seems to have dropped off in some, catastrophic earthquakes. And now but the lane where the fine wine people go is still hanging in there, right? Like, and because I think we're kind of the future of the wine industry. I think this is where consumers are going. I think they're going in the direction of better wine, of exploring, of not the same old. I think people are very adventurous. They're willing to spend more because they're drinking less, and it's an experience. And we have on my side of the business, my little corner of the business, that's how we've always operated. So it's like, okay, great, now's our time to shine. The things I would say about the past 5 years is that my ramp up was actually probably the easiest because that's when I was just kind of, turning a crank, getting product to the market. We had one SKU, then we had two, and just kind of slowly, getting into more states and expanding our reach kind of organically. And that's the playbook that I'd say most fine wine people follow, which is not necessarily great business, right? Like, I wouldn't say fine wine people are known for like huge pre-organization and all that stuff. Like, part of this is like we need the product and then we need to massage everybody and get people to buy it. And it's like, it's a slow road. And I've always, for 20 years, the one thing that hasn't changed is that for a brand coming into the market, it's really 3 years on the ground before you start to see like real uptake, right? Where you feel like you're really starting to work. And that is a long time. That's definitely longer than like PE has a stomach for, or any of these, VC invested in brands, right? Like I see them all, like they explode. They're all over social media. And then before you know it, they run out of their investment. It's 18 months later and the banker is like, well, why aren't you, churning out like, where's your 3,000% growth? And you're just like, it doesn't work that way in this industry.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy to get the big numbers when you're filling up inventory on shelves, but obviously the reorder is what matters in this world.
Well, also. So
How how do you manage that? So like as you're picking it up, obviously you're doing the fill, you're getting at all this new distribution. How are you managing those, I guess, those relationships with retailers and execution? Because now a probably small fish in a big pond trying to get distributor attention as well as retailer, and you're breaking into a new category. Like, how do you
yeah.
manage that?
Sometimes this again, I think also this industry it's very much like bushwhacking, like we're out there with a machete just hacking down the next meter and then you're on to the next after that. So honestly, I do a lot of just personal outreach. A lot of the times it's just me being like to someone I've known for whatever number of years to be like, hey dude, you know, don't forget about my box wine. And I mean, that works probably the best. It's a matter of me just not having that many hours in the day. So things we do is we beg and plead with our vast network of distributors. Some are direct, so they control their own depletion reports. Some though go through our main national importer, which is Masanoy. And in all of those cases, some of those distributors, like we kind of have to like go through 3 channels to get a depletion report. So we cobble together all this information. We are working very hard to automate this stuff, which, through the blessing of AI, don't anybody, cancel me for using it. But it's in this sense, like this is right where we're like, oh my God, thank God, a way to finally not have to manually manage, all these contacts and all these accounts from disparate places. But that's the one thing I'd say this industry is lacking sorely in, is compatible tech. Like just the reporting is an absolute tragedy and disaster for all of us is when you're working at a national level. So we work really hard to get all those reports and at least every 6 months go through them. And we do that so that we can actually have a store finder on our website where you could put in your zip code or whatever and find like a location near you if there is one. And through that exercise, we literally see like, oh, look, it's been 6 months since these accounts in this state have bought. And we'll, email the importer or the distributor, whomever it is, and be like, hey, just pointing this out, because that's actually the work of a sales manager to do in a company. But a lot of companies don't have a sales manager. You know what I mean? Or just don't have the time to do this for every single brand. So honestly, we just try and do as much reporting for them as we can. Sometimes it's welcome, sometimes it's not.
And we see it's funny is sometimes the pushback you receive is at their own detriment. Everybody wants to sell more product. It doesn't make sense why anyone
Totally. It's information for you to use. Take it or leave it. Like if you're going to follow up with your sales reps and sell more stuff, like awesome. If you're not, like great. I did my best,
Tried the job. No,
if you get a 20% like hit rate in terms of those follow up, then that's great. That's great.
And I guess the other side of that is in your mind, how much of a revenue loss is it or potential revenue you see? Like when you go through these reports and you're saying once every 6 months, but like how many weeks or months has some of that product been missing? Do you think about that in your day-to-day business, how you guys are operating? Or is it just something where you have to just accept this is a cost of doing business?
I mean, there's always going to be some attrition, right? Because by nature of the people that we're, primarily focused on, a lot of them are going to turn over stuff, right? They're going to use it and come back to it, hopefully. I think like if we can get to a point where we're maintaining 50% of ongoing placements, that's kind of a success in my book,
Okay. Yeah.
We are, as like part of our current initiative, we do DTC, which is a channel which, of course, is, I think, very relevant to a lot of folks that might be listening to this. Like I said, our focus has been on traditional distribution and, brick and mortar, all of that. But, DTC is like the fastest way to get out there. It's expensive, right? Like it's not free. You have to.
It's got to be something that heavy and those dimensions.
I mean, it's not even so much that like they kind of sell by the piece, it works out. It's not so much that. It's just that it costs money, right? Like you're paying a service to create a platform that will on Shopify or whatever they use that people can order through a third party retailer, right? So every different service is different in how they've got their partnership set up and who they work with. But, ultimately you have to go through these multiple steps. So like obviously the retailer is taking their chunk because that's what retailers do. But you now have a middleman that's facilitating that you're paying, whatever per monthly fee plus whatever, or, you're offering shipping discounts because nobody will buy anything if they have to pay for shipping. So in the end, I mean, for us, because, we don't work on no margins, but, I'm pretty aggressive because I want to be at a certain price point more than anything, right? To get out there. But the DTC feels like a necessary evil. It's really almost a marketing tool for us. If you are doing that as your predominant way to market, then you need to build that carefully into your price and make sure that you're covering that cost, because otherwise you're not going to make any money.
Maybe this is a good little transition to our last couple of questions. What's next for the brand and what's next for you in the industry? What are you really looking forward to? What's coming up? What do you see?
Well, for Giovese Family Wines, we're hunkered down on our 3 products, and our goal over the course of the next year is we're investing in our DTC channel, but mostly we are starting to do a lot of outreach to larger chains, whether regional or national. We just did a couple months of promotion with like Safeway Albertsons in Montana and Idaho, which was really interesting. I think we were kind of a test case to see how it went, waiting for some feedback. But we're pushing in that direction to try and get, just because some states, just because of the quality, the format and everything, if you don't have, like California is just a nightmare without chain sales, right? And so that's something we're pushing on. And then I think one of the things I'm kind of excited to do as an initiative is to focus on premise as a route to market. And I think that, in an era where obviously the strains and the costs on wine in general are intense, And everybody sees like restaurants not struggle. They're putting a lot of pressure on wine as a source for income, which I get, but they're often doing it almost like it's a burden on the wine. And I feel people, like we lose people in wine at that level when they don't feel like it's affordable. The box just offers like such an affordable option without sacrificing any quality. And I really would like, we see good adoption and good success in some environments like, the brew pub or the cocktail focused or like the outdoor taco spot, like how much actual bottled, like if you're opening bottles of wine, like, you're wasting so much inevitably, right? Because people are drinking beer and cocktails like once in a while. Like it's just the way to go. And that's really, that's fun for me because, again, going back to restaurants, I do a lot of work with restaurants as the Piedmont guy. We work with a lot of, top restaurants around the country. And I would like to see this. In fact, we just won a really interesting award with the Sommelier Choice Awards and that's a panel of super legit folks like, master sommeliers, et cetera. And they awarded our red, Sandy Giovese was awarded best red for By the Glass out of all of these other wines. And I was like, this is cool.
Congratulations. That's amazing.
Thanks.
And I think anybody that's a wine drinker and goes to a restaurant would love to go back to the good old days of a sub $10 glass of wine. That's good. And I mean, that's so hard to find at this point. You are constantly competing. Do I want a $20 martini or an $18 glass of white? And it's hard to balance those out. But yeah, I think that's a great move, which is really interesting to see.
Yeah, a little cute Cortino of, house wine. It's adorable.
I mean, I think the nice outdoor Parisian cafe type of drinking on the lawn, I think that's just a really good use case and a great way to sample the product. Last question I love to ask everybody, if you could go back to your founder days of the brand or any time in your career, and someone came to you and said, hey, I'm thinking of launching a wine brand, spirits brand, whatever it might be. What is one piece of advice you wish you had that you did not, that you would love to relay back to your younger self or to someone else entering this space?
So I feel like I had the advantage by the time I launched this brand. I feel like I pretty much knew everything there was to know. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have had the confidence to do it, I would say, gosh, it's definitely been a learning curve. If I could change one thing, it would probably be my accounting skills. I hate to say that, but there's nothing about the actual wine part that I don't more or less know, but the accounting and the business side of things for me is a bit of a tragedy. Going back to nobody likes math. So that's the thing where it's like, I wish I'd maybe had a better setup, right? Like got more professionals involved and like set this up more properly so that I, was running just a better oiled machine. I mean, QuickBooks, I love how they propose this to like just any entrepreneur, like you just pop that thing open and start accounting yourself away. Like that's the most confusing. Like you need to be a CPA to use that thing. That would be my advice.
No, so you end up doing cash flow balance. You just go look at your account and go, oh, it's there. Good.
Yeah, sometimes I'm like, just hit the reconcile button, Yeah. Who cares anymore?
It's a tricky, yeah, they definitely oversimplify what's needed to be proper bookkeeping.
Totally. And like people going to college now, I'm like, oh my God, like take some business classes, take some administrative, I didn't go to a college that would have offered that because it was, we were a little bit too high and mighty for that, but you could take any physics class you wanted. But, if in most...
Just don't worry about, you can't do taxes, but you can
right. So I went to the University of Chicago. So like I know all sorts of very random things, but I can't balance a budget to save my life. So that would be my big advice is really just like, get some business skills, make sure you know how that stuff works because ultimately you'd rather not pay somebody to do that for you until you get to a certain size.
That's great. I think it's all great advice. It's just about having those fundamentals that every business needs, no matter what your brand is, your passion is, you got to be able to run the business. So I think that's great. Often overlooked. Amy, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I love the conversation. Love hearing about your story and the brand. I hope everyone has a chance that's listening to try the product. Keep your eyes out for it in retail. Obviously, it sounds like D2C is making a big push, so you can probably find it online and ship.
Yeah, we'll be, I think, launching with our new service next week, hopefully. So
by the
off for the races.
It's live. So check it out online. And again, anyone that's listening who heard anything that sounds similar, if you've had distribution gaps, problem getting visibility at store, issues trying to maintain if your distributors hitting their targets, or just shipping product out and leaving it in the back of the warehouse, Let us know. Visit us at shopwitheileen.com. We'll give you 10 stores for free. And as always, know thy shelf.
Thank you so much.